Sometimes it's really hard to even know what gesture is or why you should use it. Figures always feel the most convincing to me when they exhibit a type of movement. If we just go back to the appreciation of abstraction, asymmetry is just a fantastic choice. The way that I'm thinking of this working for my drawing is that anytime I have a curve with its apex offset to a curve below, right, that has its apex slightly shifted, you create a natural interest in the viewer's attention that's very different than what I almost always see people making gesture drawings do. This was my biggest challenge in drawing. I would just go through the outside and draw the same thing. Inevitably, I ended up with this. And my best guess at why is that when we start drawing intuitively, we're concerned with capturing the shape. What it does visually is anytime we parallel form, it creates closure. So instead, I try to consciously do the opposite. What is it that you're drawing? Is that the outside of the leg or the back of the leg? It's never any of it. It's an idea about its position, but primarily the idea is asymmetry for the creation of rhythm. Loomis says something about rhythm. Everybody has something different to say about rhythm. Mine's going to be more specific. Every line is going to represent a part. So it's the spacing in between represents the joint, the transition between parts. That's the most developed connection that I'm making. It's not the front, it's not the back, it's not the contour. Every line equals the simplified, abstracted idea of the part. And I mostly focused on the creation of movement through that offset relationship of apex so that I can create an experience. Notice the difference if I were to do the same curves, but pull them out a little bit. Doesn't that feel like there's a lack of rhythm? Or there's a slight drop off of rhythm? That's asking the viewer too much. Okay, so let's do some examples. I like to start with the head. For me, the head is this great opportunity to begin it with a natural focal point. I'll then move through the spine. I do this with 4 lines. From there, I'm going to move into the weight-bearing side of the pelvis. And this usually gets 1 line. Then into, from the weight-bearing side of the pelvis, if possible, the weight-bearing leg. And each limb for me is about 2 to 3 lines. From there, I then like to work on supporting legs so that I'm consciously making a different emphasis on where weight is in a body. And then there into the arms. So that'd be the same, 2 to 3. So in total, like if you feel lost or confused with your gesture, I mean, again, I don't do math well, but 16 to 17 lines thereabouts is what my gestures are. Every gesture process is unique to the person that's using it. At the end of this course, you should come away with a couple different approaches to think gesture, and then I hope a broad enough understanding of the subject to make your own innovations on it. So let's do this over here. And I'm just going to try to explain why I'm making the decisions I am. So first, I'm going to start with the head. Head's going to be a ball, simple shape for now. And then from here, I'm going to start to work into the spine. If I'm not analyzing the spine, I know what my default would be. I would start to look at the outside, but that gives a totally contrary idea of what we just went through as being important to the figure. That's not energetic, that's symmetrical, it's stiff. It's not truthful to what's actually happening. So instead of that, I'm not looking at the outside. I'm drawing my understanding. I'm drawing the idea. I'm trying to connect with the technique. So here, what would the spine be doing if we just kind of looked at that for a second? If we just look at the big spatial directions, even though the head is turned, the spine would still be pushing the neck forward. And then from there, the thoracic spine would be going back and then forward this way. Spine is this kind of big C curve, and then I can see the tilt of the pelvis doing that. Here's the lumbar. So my lumbar would be going this way. So when I'm approaching a gesture drawing, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm drawing. I'm trying to understand the inside in order to make the drawing. The outside can be useful clues to that, but I'm not drawing the outside. So when I make this drawing, my view is 1 line per part. So every line is a simplification of a part, and then they handhold in a space that is the joint. So I'm going to say the neck goes this way. Aim to make these central to forms. Are they always central to forms? No. Does that mean that it's the outside of the neck? No. It's just the understructure. There's my spine. Notice how that is an echo of that direction. Thoracic goes this way. So I'm starting to pick up on that movement of the body forward there, just like I showed you in that little spine diagram. So I've done 2 so far, thoracic. I like to add a third one, which would not be the spine, but instead is the stretching of the front of the body. So especially if we're standing, you get this beautiful counter curve from the taller curvature of the back to the lower pitch or peak of that curve to the stretch. So thoracic, stretch, lumbar, step 2 is done. Yay! My steps here are for me because I screw things up all the time. So I can double check. I can go back. It's like, oh, where does this look stiff and why? So that's done. Pelvis, where's the weight-bearing side? Well, I'm always looking for the high side. So I usually start with the weight because I have the expectation that, right, if we put weight on one side of our pelvis, if it's here symmetrical, if I start to put weight on one side, it shifts it up. And that's a great way to look for kind of catching that imbalance or that asymmetry of curve. It's not always the case though. Like here, it looks to me more like that high curve is here, because even though there's weight on this hip, this feels shifted. So I'm gonna do that. But again, there's no right or wrong answer. The only thing that matters to me at this point is that I've kept rhythm with every curve. So check that off the list. And then maybe I'll go into this leg now. So how would I move and maintain rhythm from that hip into the femur? Same thing, that's the part of the femur. Is that the outside of the femur or the hip? I'm not even gonna answer it, right? We know there's no outside drawings here. So femur goes this way. Whenever I have a bent leg, that's when I'd get closer to the 3 lines, because I do 1 for the femur, maybe like a little transition line for the knee or the elbow, and then down and into my lower leg. So another thing, notice that it's not important to me that every line is precise the minute I put it down. I'm uptight, but I'm not that uptight. So I like to I'll do some ghosting, right? I'll do a few lines and then kind of settle in on the one I like. It doesn't matter. Like I don't have a belief that your drawing needs to produce the product view of the image that you have in your mind immediately. That's amazing, but it's not really how I think of gesture. Now we find ourselves at the foot. So let's say a few things about the foot. So the basic idea of the foot is a triangle. I think it's a good shape, right? It's a good shape because we want to have some kind of stability and contact with the ground. So I always try to keep this with some type of movement or dynamism to it. So let's talk about some different views and then we'll jump back into this. I can't have floating figures without feet. So this is front. If I want to do something 3/4 for a foot, I'm going to take this part and move it over. In the process of moving it over, I see more of the side. So that would be the outside. This might be the front to the big toe. And then I always try to pick up on one of these rhythms and let that flow into the top of the foot. So that would look like this. So it's like you have a really dynamic sock. So that's front. This is 3/4. What would profile be? Profile might be the same shape without the front. So now I just have this. In anatomy terms, this would be the tendon ramp of the extensors moving into the front part of the foot. It's not a total abstraction to see that. That would be side. So if I see a pose like this, a challenging pose where the foot is up and arched, I know that this is the model I want. It's 3/4, and then I'll see if I can advance that gesture. So this is 3/4, but the foot there would be doing, so here's the curve, that kind of tendon ramp experience from the front. Same principle, right? But this is where it's making contact with the ground. So I'm just gonna push this out. So I'm bending it basically. Here, ground, then down. This is an S curve, because that's stretching, and then I'm back up and in. So all I did was pinch and stretch my sock. I know this is closer to shape, right? But I'm not closing off the top. Like I'm not actually making it a sock. It's just a way for me to put the figure in contact with some type of ground plane. Let's do the supporting leg. So maybe on this side, I'll try to give a different experience. So this side is all C curve. You notice that? The shorter C curves. I always find that to be consistent with pinch sides of the body or weight-bearing sides of the body. The other side of the body, maybe I'll try something different. Maybe let's play around with a longer relational line. Maybe I'll make a longer gesture like this. What about one long S curve there? That still does what I want. It still brings the eye with asymmetrical relationships from top down to ground, but it gives a different experience to the other side. So this is pinched, this feels more passive or stretched. What do we have for our foot? We have this one, but maybe a little bit, maybe kind of that one, but flirting towards 3/4. Here's where that would be, and then down. So this gives me the most important thing for my gesture, head to foot, right? I've composed the read of the viewer to move with, composition being the asymmetry. You start at the head, you're engaged with the rhythm, and that pulls you down piece by piece into the ground. I've done everything I can to make it so that the viewer looks and engages with the drawing head to foot. And that's important to me because, again, when I started drawing, I would really want to copy Rob Liefeld or Todd McFarlane as much as possible. And so I would start and I'd render their heads. But then by the time I got to the foot, it didn't even look like the same figure. I hadn't related parts. I had only looked at the individual ones and devoted an intense amount of attention to each. So this is my corrective to that. Now, before we move on, let's do some wrapping lines. What is the basic 3D tilt of each part? And so I'm just going to use the wrapping line again. Think of like it's just a rubber band. We're taking a rubber band and subtracting it off the cylinder. The head looks like it's a little bit leaned back. Right? The way you could double check that if you're doing a more kind of finished drawing or you want to look at some actual points of reference, I usually look from like the top of the ear to the brow, right? As if somebody were wearing glasses. And if you can kind of smooth that out, that's about the same thing that I'm aiming for. Just that there's a subtle tilt back. I know that the neck comes forward. I know that the rib cage comes out. How do I know that? Because we studied the spine. I know that the pelvis is going to go this way. So each, like I usually like 2. This one feels like too much. So each part now, notationally, has a bit of information about the perspective. This femur comes forward. This will become more important when I'm trying to solve for foreshortening, which you can't really do in gesture, so because you don't have shapes. But this is about the best I get from it. And then maybe I have a little bit about this back here. Another thing you could check is, how is your proportion? So if I'm looking for 8 heads, I want to match the top to be the same height as the bottom. The value of this stage in a drawing is I can decide if I want to move forward or not. If this looks like something I want, great, spend your time developing it. If not, you only spend a minute, do another one, try something different. So let's now do our arms. Okay, so arms, same thing, 2 to 3 lines. The only thing you need to ask is how would I build off what's already there? So maybe this line, which I could say that's the deltoid or the shoulder. That's how it would relate to a part. Maybe that builds off the neck. The only thing that's important to me is that every line leads you to every other line. Maybe that's one big C curve. Or maybe you separate the radius ulna hand into another rhythm off there. I always make the forearm and hand one line. So it could be one C, one S, but the hand is always an extension of the gesture of the arm. It's very rare that I would do this and then like something like that or something dramatically different because we expect that syncing of forearm and hand. And then on this side, I do the same, shoulder. So 1, 2, this relates to this, relates to this. But one thing I want you to pay attention to or just notice as I'm doing these, there's never in my drawing a vertical or a horizontal. So the only thing I'm doing that's kind of key here to keep something that feels active, that feels like it's full of motion, is number 1, the rhythm or the curve, but 2, every curve exists on a diagonal. So here's here, and I always do that extra one for the bend. This comes back. And then look at this forearm. Maybe I could do like a nice S curve off in total. The forearm to hand, and then this comes back this way. So each one will go a little bit faster, just so you don't have to feel like I'm slow walking you through each one. So there's my head, cervical, thoracic, stretching, lumbar. I'm just going to jump to this one, pelvis, and then maybe I'll wrap a line over to get to that weight-bearing side. It's common in drawing classes to do these really quickly, right? So, usually in a life drawing class, you'll have gestures will be done in a minute or 2 minutes or something like that. So there's always this emphasis on getting it done really quickly, and that's fine, but speed just comes with practice. So if it takes you, if you're gonna try to do these for yourself at home, if it takes you 5 minutes to get here and you feel good about it, that's awesome, right? That's fantastic. There's no real emphasis or need to get time. The reason I would do that in the class, make the time brief, is to force people to repeat, right? That's the only value I would see. Like, so if you do 2 minutes and in 2 minutes you get through the spine, but you do it really well, that would be fantastic. So here's the weight bearing side, and then maybe we go to the femur. One thing you can do, with foreshortening at this point would be play with line weight. Really needs shape to create some kind of spatial difference forward and back. But I don't have that. So things that I can use would be like line pressure or line weight. Here's my rhythm, so that comes forward. Here's that knee. And then from that knee, bounce that back into maybe make a S curve. I use a S curve here a lot. I like the way that it kind of feels like the muscle disposition or distribution in the calf. I realize that's dangerous to say because now everybody's going to say you're drawing the outside of the calf. Foot breakdown here. So heel, 3/4. So maybe I could make that a little clearer. Here, this is bent back. So that's 3/4, but again, really pushed under. So maybe let's do something like that. That bendy sock. Here's some wrapping lines. Let's do some wraps on our pelvis. Rib cage goes back, and then arm. So shoulder, what does this relate to? I could build off this line. Maybe it needs to be a little higher. Again, that's one thing I like about this is I can move things around. So right now I'm trying to manage or try to capture the pose as I see it more so, but most of the time I don't. It actually takes, I have to concentrate to do the pose. I'm so used to changing it. And I always encourage people to do that too, because who cares if you drew what was there? Who's gonna know? Like, I'm not gonna ever take my drawings over to my mom and say like, Mom, look at my drawings. She'd be like, you idiot. That doesn't look like the model. Like, she says that anyways, but she'll, there's no reason for her to say it because she has never seen the model. So nobody will ever know what the model looks like. They're only gonna care if the drawing is interesting to them. If you've made a cool drawing, people will love it. So here's this arm. So shoulder, upper arm, maybe a little elbow change. You could double check your proportions if you feel like you made any part too low or too long. Happens a lot. Did that get a little bit off? Maybe. Well, I should probably check that next time a little bit more. I kind of like the way that the rhythm between these hands looks. There's that kind of quality of motion or connected quality between them. So that's one thing I tried to focus on there. But that would be done, right? So I'd be good with that. One thing that if you would like to try to change or move your poses around that you could start to play with is where the center of gravity is on a figure. And one way that you could find that is if you look at the pit of the neck, so pit of the neck here, and plumb a line down. If this center of gravity line is close to the medial ankle or the medial malleolus, so this guy, that's a pretty balanced pose. So mine's pretty close. We check it on this one. Is the pit of the neck, where does that balance relative to the weight-bearing ankle? Hopefully you have a bit of an idea of the cadence of my lines. And so short, medium, long, right? So there's asymmetry even in their lengths. Short, medium, long into the leg. But remember that organization and notice that regardless of the view, I don't need to change it. In this course, what you're going to learn is how to pose your figures, how to think about the internal dynamics of your figures, proportion, how to think about what design is and how you might want your figure to look slightly different based on what you want to prioritize in the final result of what it is you intend to make. Really with a focus and emphasis on organizing your thoughts and making gesture something that doesn't have to be mysterious or ambiguous. So I'm giving it some structure, of course, and some steps. Check it out. It's at proko.com/Hampton. I'll see you there.